Yo.
Janaya Future Khan.
What's good, sugar?
Honey Dijon.
I know, right? How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I got up very, very early for you, and I didn't regret it for a moment.
Oh, what time is it there? Because I'm in Berlin and it's like, I think almost 7, which is like my morning because I don't even
Okay.
function before 5. So this is like my morning.
I feel that. I was up at 6.
Seriously. But I'm sure it took like 5 minutes for that beauty to come through. Right?
I'll take it. I'll take it. Anyway, how's home?
It's so funny because in the last year with the pandemic, I don't know where home is anymore. I've had to redefine what home is. I think home is just basically where I feel most myself. But tell me a little bit about Toronto because I only know it from the club scene because Toronto was one of the first cities that embraced me as a DJ.
So when I grew up, it was a totally different place. I mean, I'm sad that it's being so like rapidly gentrified. I feel like the art scene is really under attack. I grew up surrounded by a lot of art and surrounded by a lot of community, and so those two things really shaped me.
I was sort of in a bubble because I was only around creatives in the club scene and fashion people and all of that. So being a person of color, non-binary, trans-identified, I wasn't invited into a lot of spaces, so I had to make those spaces, and I did that through music and through fashion. So that was my beginnings.
I mean, I completely relate. So I sort of found a community of people who felt like familiar later on in my life. I feel like I was picking up little parts of what I could be everywhere that I went. And really all came together when I walked into this boxing club for the first time.
Boxing? I just took up boxing, actually.
Shut up, for real?
Yeah, because it was the one thing that I could do. It's such a great stress reliever. No one tells you that. Like, I just think about all the shit that pisses me off, and then I start boxing, and afterwards I feel divine.
Yeah, it's catharsis. It's control. It's so many things at once.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sexy.
Yeah. Boxing really was my conduit into activism, into fashion, into myself in a way, because that boxing club that I walked into, I thought it was going to be like regular and ended up being a place for like weirdos, pariahs, like trans people, survivors. I just immediately felt at home. So my first sparring partner was this young trans guy, and I didn't even know what that meant when I walked in there.
Seriously? You didn't know anything about trans culture? Is that what you were saying when you walked into this boxing thing?
That's exactly it. I didn't know anything about trans culture. Yeah, it was, it's one thing to be trans, but what does that actually mean?
I question that a lot because I think for me, I only know what I am with the language that I've been given to communicate to other people.
Right.
So a lot of times when I think about my transness, I always relate it to, well, how do I define that for myself? And I've had to do a lot of soul searching for that. So when you think about a queer person not knowing what trans is, imagine feeling marginalized within the marginalized within the marginalized, and add race and add identity to that. And then getting into fashion, this beautiful world, this creative, beautiful world, and then come to find out they ain't inviting brown folks to the table.
That's right.
So then it's like, how do I find my space within that space? So I realized instead of asking for a seat at the table, I was gonna go into another room and build my own castle. So that's what that was about.
That's what we gotta do. That's what we gotta do.
And the fact is, I had to learn everyone else's language, but no one had to learn mine. So I had to create something for myself. So that's what I try to do in my work. And I feel that is a form of activism because there's not one way to be an activist. You can march in the streets, you can protest, but you can also create spaces where that energy isn't there.
100%. I used to think that, you just sort of became one and there was this big epiphany, and suddenly you knew what your purpose was in the world and everything else. But I think it happened incrementally in these really small ways around finding my voice and really being in service to others. I think the point of being alive is to figure out who we are and what our purpose is, and I think we can only really figure out who we are in service to something greater than what we are and who we are.
I just think, for me, if I can leave the planet and inspire people to live authentically, because I call it a mirror of affirmation. I didn't have that. You can't be something that you cannot see. And so if I inspire people just to be who they are unapologetically and stop saying sorry or apologizing for their existence, then I've done something. But you know what I really think activism is? I've had enough of your bullshit. I've had enough of your bullshit. Your bullshit is not my bullshit, and I don't need to accept your bullshit. So you know what? No.
Yeah, something infuriating about the fact that our strength is meant to be determined by how much suffering we can endure. And we're supposed to build art from that place. And I'm like, what about joy?
Well, it's so funny because a lot of people always ask me, what does my music sound like? And I always say, I'm a proponent of joy. And the gay black clubs were a place of joyous celebration when the outside world didn't say they were anything. And so I experienced music through joy.
Yeah.
I experienced how I talk, how I dress, and all of that was joy. That's how I was taught. So joy for me is the number one reason why I do everything.
That's right, yeah.
But anyway, you know what people never ask non-binary and trans people about is pleasure.
I would say that that's pretty accurate.
What about the humanizing of us, the sexual parts of us, the pleasurable parts of us, how we partner with people, how we express ourselves sexually? What makes us feel sexy?
Do you know, this is something that I am still learning because I have prioritized work, traveling, writing, speaking, and in doing so, I'm still learning about myself. And my therapist says, I would like you to have some fun. And I said, well, I just had this really rigorous debate the other day and I really enjoyed it. And she's like, that's not the kind of fun that I'm talking about.
That's one way of looking at fun. So, darling, how do you feel about the world of fashion now that they've gotten a hold of that pretty face and that hair? If I could pay for that hair, I would literally go right down to the wig shop and say, I'll have bundle number 75, the Janiyah Future Con situation.
Do you know what? So fashion made it so that I could be in my body so much more fully than I felt before. Fashion isn't about what you wear, it's really how you wear it. It has everything to do with your energy, your sense of self, how much you're in there. And so I can put on, the highest brands from the oldest fashion houses, and it wouldn't matter if I didn't feel like very much inside. And so what being queer is, I think at the heart of what being trans is, what being, just who you are, being in yourself, however you identify across the spectrum, that is that sort of, that power, that it factor, I think, that changes from you wearing your clothes to your clothes wearing you. It feels really important to me to be less about masculinity, less about femininity, and more about what is whole for me, like what is the whole.
Right. I've always loved fashion when it was related to a cultural movement, shift, or change.
Yes.
And for me, my favorite time in history has always been from the late 60s until, I always say July 3rd, 1981, when the news of 41 homosexuals are diagnosed with a mysterious cancer now that we know
That's
is
right.
AIDS. But
Right.
between 1967 and 1980 was for me the golden era because you had the women's movement, gay rights movement, punk, new wave, the birth of hip hop, civil rights. All of this happened within such a short amount of time, from 65 to 81. If you think that's 16 years, that's not really a long time.
It's not.
And so I've always loved those women not wearing burning of the bra or gay men in the whole leather coat. Just so many things happened
The
in
leather
that short period of
movement,
time. Yeah, so for me, I always love when people use fashion to express a lot of that. I just wanted to take the language of the children and show the world how amazing and beautiful it is.
Yes.
I mean, that to me was the whole point of just look at this, look at these incredible culture of people that made art and beauty from marginalization. So a lot of my fashion is about vibrancy, celebration, honoring, putting things into the light that were in the dark for so long. I mean, obviously, we're gonna have to continue this conversation in person.
Yes, we will.
Are you based in LA now?
I am based in LA.
I will be there in October for some shows, and I'm gonna live there in the month of December just because I wanna get into the LA fantasy, because I love LA. If it wasn't so far from Europe, because most of my work is in Europe,
Right.
I would live in LA. But that 13-hour plane trip every time just to go have a coffee is not the look.
I feel that. Well, look, until you get here in October, you'll be living in my heart.
Until we meet in person and we can have some shampoodles. I'll see you soon, sugar.
Bye, love.